Down east, 90.7.
Are you ready?
You can introduce him.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for all. It's nice to see such a big crowd. We have here with us tonight Keel Kemper, and you are the.
I'm the regional wildlife biologist for Maine Fish and Wildlife that would cover Westport and most of coastal Maine. To give you a rough idea of the area that we cover, before I do that, I'm joined by my associate Bob Cordes, Bob is the deputy director of the wildlife division, so I thought I'd bring the big gun down here to make sure I was getting it all correct. So I'm a regional wildlife biologist that covers central Maine. The area that I cover, if you know Maine, is probably roughly from the Penobscot to the end of Muskegon, from Skowhegan to Monhegan. And that's a pretty generalized, about 150 towns. Of course, Westport and all of coastal Maine is part of that group. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here because I appreciate that some members of the community have woken up and realized that, like most coastal communities in Maine, we have an excess and overly abundant population, and that's beginning to have impacts on human health, forest health, and basically quality of life issues. You know, it's funny because white-tailed deer has gone, in some minds, from this being big noble species over here all the way over to the other side of the pendulum where people are considered deer to be close to vermin. And when you look at the impact that deer is having primarily on human health related to tick-borne diseases, you can understand why that. And this is a problem that's not unique to Westport. It is the entire coast of Maine has this issue. The entire coast of the United States has this issue. And, you know, the question becomes, as a community, what if can you do about it? Now, I can appreciate, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about any aspect of this. But if you came to figure out how to solve the deer in your garden problem and useless deer problems in general, I'd be happy to say, okay, here's my card. Give me a call, talk with me and my staff. We'll be happy to work with anybody on their nuisance deer issue. I was hoping that this discussion would be more at a higher level about what you got, what are your options, what are the difficulties that communities face. If you are familiar with Maine, you know, I know it sounds like I just arrived here from away. My anniversary day in January will be 37 years at Fish and Wildlife Department. So I was involved in the removal of all the deer off of Monhegan. You remember that in 1991. Now Monhegan is a community that they're about the only ones that have solved their issue. But just before we get specifically into some issues around Westport, you can also, if you follow what happened on Islesboro, and how Islesboro tried to go through this as a community, and the trials and tribulations they had, and the dissension that occurred within the community over this issue, eventually culminating in a 3-year special hunt that Islesboro had. But anyway, I digress. There's a lot of, the point is, there's a lot of history. There's a lot of other communities who have tried to address this problem. And sometimes the road follows a similar path. So having said that, I brought a little piece of paper to sort of guide the discussion. And whenever we talk to people about this, you know, they all want to know numbers. And they don't get happy when you say it doesn't matter what the number is, it's too many. They want to know specifically. And for example, we've had some communities who they want to go count, gotta have a count, and you can do that. Now, but to some degree, this if you look here, what I provide you are basically your 5-year deer harvest for Westport. Okay, those are your numbers. They're not for a community. Okay, you got a few deer hunters. But looking at this deer density estimates, now you have to understand, if you're a hunter, then you understand this. If you're not a hunter, then you may not understand that. You know, we manage all of our species in Maine at what we refer to at the wildlife management district level. So we manage them on the landscape level as opposed to what's going on in your back 40 acres or what may be going on in your specific town. This is in WMD 25. So when we look at deer density numbers, we're looking at deer density numbers for that town, for that WMD, not specific to your town. My guess is your numbers are probably higher than what they are at the WMD level because most island communities have really, really high deer densities. So I throw this out there just to sort of show you. Now, let's just say this is just like back of the napkin math. So do not hold me to this. But if you take your number, say, of density per square mile at 32, let's just round it off of 30 for the easy math. You got 9 square miles. Roughly, I think Westport's about 9 square miles. You multiply that, you get, so 30 times 9, 270 deer. They're always more than you think. Let's just say it's not unreasonable that you could have 40 or 50 deer per square mile. This many, Islesboro has well in excess of 50 deer per square mile. So that's not unreasonable. You know, if you figure that half of those are does, and generally more than half are does, and each of those is kicking out, like some people say, multiply that times 0.8, but let's just say each of those is kicking out one fawn a year, and of course, as you know, many of them kicking out more. You got a burgeoning deer problem that, as much as I'm sure looking around, looks like we got some pretty good deer hunters in the room. Deer hunters have not demonstrated the ability to control deer numbers in any community along the East Coast that has been tried. Okay, so the idea that you can have a few hunters come in, truth is, I'm a deer hunter. I'm also a dubber. So there's lots of dubbers. So we have found that it becomes very difficult to achieve your objectives of reduced deer numbers by just relying on your hunters. Okay. We can discuss that in detail, but most of the hunters get offended by that, you know, they're pretty good. But what happens is, and I'll just go ahead and one of the things that you see in these communities, that the deer hunters are all in favor of deer reduction at the start. And they'll be happy to get it done for the community. But then when they wake up and realize that, geez, I don't know that I want to shoot myself out of my honey hole and reduce numbers to a level that begins to impact forest health and human health, then what happens is the hunters kind of turn on you. And we've seen this up the entire eastern seaboard, where all the hunters are also in favor of it, and then all of a sudden they're not. So I'm just throwing out some things that if you want to look at the history of what's going on Block Island in New York, that's a great example of getting everything ready as a community to move in and have deer reduction, and then having a court injunction brought in by deer hunters to prevent deer hunting. I mean, excessive deer hunting or removing those populations. So as I say, everyone wants numbers. I'm hesitant to throw out exact numbers because we know you got way too many. Give you some ideas. If you want to talk about human health, which is tick-borne diseases, and as we all know, the coast of Maine is on fire with tick-borne diseases. So it's not just sugar-coated. You've got Georgetown has the highest per capita incidence of tick-borne diseases. I think I want to say, if not in the U.S., at least the East Coast. Okay, all these communities, Islesboro, got a call yesterday from North Haven. They might need to come out there and talk to them about their excess of deer numbers. Okay, so this is a very hard problem to solve, and it should be commended as a community, but at least somebody saying maybe we ought to think about this problem. So, you know, everybody wants to know, you can sort of read through this stuff. I think the critical piece that you have to remember is to do anything, you have to have a consensus, and you have to agree as a community. And I would recommend for this community, if you are going forward with this idea, we found that, for example, in Islesboro, it was very helpful for the town to have a quote deer committee with a few people who were charged with this issue and all of what it can entail and trying to implement certain things that you can do. So I printed off some of these options, okay, of what are some of these things that the communities have tried. But before I go through them, does anyone have any comment or question at this point that you came here and you wanted to hear this, or you really need to say that? This should be a very informal discussion amongst friends to figure out how the hell you got to crack this problem. Or
I have something to say.
Sure.
So it kind of became an issue in contact with you because I got a number of people who indicated that they've noticed a significant difference in the deer behavior this year. So like the numbers are fairly steady on your chart, but yet I think anybody that's trying to grow anything ornamental, anything edible, anything pretty, anything that's not poisonous, even some things that are poisonous, nothing is growing this year on Westport Island because the deer eat everything.
Sure.
So
I mean,
that's
as
kind of
I
what brought it up.
say, if you're ultimately headed to driving a Hummer and only growing holly. Okay.
Oh, they eat the holly.
I'm sure they will, but you get my point, is you're really headed toward a, yes, so.
The drought had a lot to do with this
Right.
whole conversation.
And in regards to deer behavior,
Yep, and what they're eating.
Yeah.
And what's available.
sure.
So, it's Mother Nature's involved here.
There's no doubt about it. There's no question that those numbers are going to fluctuate. The drought probably did create some issues. I mean,
No acorn.
No acorns.
yeah, it was certainly not the case, but the thing to remember, Mother Nature is very bountiful. And in the complete absence of acorns, deer still go into winter fast. Okay, so, yeah, and what they can browse is so unlimited that it's pretty hard to, I generally don't feel like, quote, there's no food for them. Cause, there is. And so, I have no doubt that we certainly we see things that quote change behavior. I'm kind of curious as what that behavior looks like because they're still eating ornamentals, they're still doing their thing, they're still, other questions or comments?
Right.
Yeah,
Where do you get these numbers from? The square mile? That just.
the deer density per square
Yeah,
mile?
yeah.
Well, I chose not to drag down our deer biologist from Bangor for this first meeting. And as I usually try to tell people, deer science is rocket science. Okay? And it's fairly complicated, but there is a whole host of work that goes into that deer density estimate. We used to do we don't do as much of this anymore, but we would actually go out and do what we refer to as pellet counts, and we would derive deer densities. But now it's become fairly sophisticated modeling that you can look at. You can really look at your hunter harvest, you can look at age-sex ratios, there's a number of attributes you can look into. But I chose to I said, if it gets too technical, then I'll drag the deer biologist down here, who that's all he does, and he can explain how he arrives at these numbers.
The reason I ask is because I can go out on a summer night in for 5-6 acres, we farm down in Westport, and I can count 40 deer at night.
Yes, you can.
And
And so my response to that is,
It's the
Yeah.
whole wildlife district.
Oh,
It's all-
yeah, and so you got, I don't know if you ever come in, but that number is driven at a larger landscape level. And if you understand what WMD 25 is, it covers all kinds of towns, all these communities, we're all in WMD 25. And when you look at things on the WMD level, we can't look at it on each town level or what's going on in your back 40. Listen, I have no doubt that these numbers that represent what it is for WMD is higher here. Okay, these are very conservative estimates.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah, these are very conservative estimates. Yes, yeah.
How does being an island affect the deer population? Does it affect it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's like, and bear with me if I you kind of lucky. Because in other words, let's just say I wrinkle my nose and all the deer are gone. So the ability for deer to come on to Westport is somewhat limited. You kind of got a moat to protect you. Now, what you're gonna hear is what I call the Christopher Columbus deer. And they're like, this is all they heard. It's all we heard in Islesboro. They were like, well, you can get rid of all the deer. They're just coming swimming over. Now, we all know that deer can swim. And we all know that they have the ability to swim. You've seen them on lakes. But they're not sitting here on one side of the river going, I wonder what's out there on the other side. That's not how deer think. Okay, don't be Dr. Seuss. Okay, you don't get talked to them, and that's not how deer think. They don't even know there's a Westport to go to. Okay, deer fall in the water, deer get in the water, but there are no Christopher Columbus deer who were saying, I'm going to go and explore that ground out there. So the point being is that if you did serious deer reduction, at least in this community, you would have a better opportunity to limit in migration. If you're in Wisconsin, they got it from Dresden, you know, so you do have kind of an opportunity in that you've got a big moat around the town. So in theory, if you could reduce those numbers down to a suitable level, which is a very large order, because for human health, tick-borne issues, you need to get them down to about 10 or less per square mile. That's a lot, okay, and keep it there. So if you're at 40, 30 square mile, you got a long, you got some work in front of you. And I mean, if I had the silver bullet, I would be monetized, but I don't. And so they said, well, what are we gonna do? These are some of the challenges. So I did drop down a few items. Thrown out there, it's this concept of expanded archery. Now, this is what you have to remember. Expanded archery was invented in this state, not for this purpose. Expanded archery is really driven in places where you can't hunt with a firearm because of congestion or density of neighbors. Downtown Augusta, downtown Waterville. Those are where we generally have expanded archery. Now, yes, our coastal islands fall into some expanded archery, but you know, as we're tossing around ideas about what you can do, if petitioning and having expanded archery apply to Westport would be one thing. But it's a little small thing because, you know, I mean, look, if it were me, I'd be trying to kill deer as best I could, and I would prefer to have other things than a bow and arrow. Because we want to be efficient, we want to be effective, but you need lots of, you gotta come at this, you need lots of arrows in your quiver to come at this problem, and that could be easily one of them. So the idea of introducing expanded archery to the island provides opportunity for bow hunters and crossbow hunters, and it gives you more opportunity to kill deer and to increase your harvest. That's an issue. So special hunt, where you get your own little special hunt. Now, Islesboro did this, they had a special hunt. It's a process that you have to go through as a town. You have to work with us, and you have to get, the commissioner has what's referred to as an advisory committee. And you sort of have to, when you go out and create a special hunt, that's a little process, you know, you get your own little, in Islesboro, they did it for immediately following the close of the muzzleloading season for 2 or 3 weeks. And they did that for a 3-year period to try to reduce numbers and to try to, and we worked with them and we got it all set up, and it went for 3 years, and then it was over. As I say, most hunters are dubbers, and they did pretty well on Islesboro. In fact, you hunters who in the audience will appreciate that. I got complaints from hunters on Islesboro because it was snowy. And I'm like, you know, I don't know about you guys on the island, but us guys in here in the inland, we kind of like it to go deer hunting in the snow. And so please don't let us know that that's an issue. And so that, you know, a special hunt is very special. You gotta go, you gotta do some work, you gotta meet with us, you have to meet with the advisory council, you have to get permission, you gotta think about it. Well, I reference, if you want to consider that, you should consider having a deer committee with some people who are part of this, who are invested in the problem, who can come up to Augusta a couple of times and meet with people. And so the special hunt is not unknown. That is an avenue that is another arrow in your quiver. Yes.
Was that successful in Islesboro?
So you ask. I made the mistake early on. Someone said, well, how many deer are they gonna kill? I said, I don't know, it'd be nice if they got 100. And so they were like, oh, well, Bob just said we gotta get 100. I'm like, well, I just said, and I think the first year they killed about 50 deer. And we needed them to kill 250. Okay. So, and then some years it was, it just kind of puttered along like that. But you're relying on people who don't do this professionally, have lives and jobs. It gets really cold in late December. And so, the effort was not as if you could, wasn't a Monhegan effort. Okay, so if many of you are familiar with Monhegan, they hired a sharpshooter. His name was Tony D. Nicola. It was a very successful deer reduction business. And he took them all off and we killed all the deer in Monhegan.
How much that cost them?
It cost a lot. Well, it was so funny. It didn't cost as much then because this guy was just getting going and he did it pretty cheaply. But just to give you a sense of what's going on now, his business is entirely in New York State and he is doing ovocectomies. So in other words, he goes, they take a doe deer, they tranquilize her, they sterilize her, and they wake her back up. And that goes for $1,500 per deer.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
She's gonna have what, 7 in her lifespan?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a very, and that's being done in very populated areas in New York where they can't hunt and have this same issue, but they have, most main communities would not be able to tolerate that kind of expense. It just tell you, that's the kind of things that are going on. So, that, I don't know that you would get consensus in this community to do something like that.
No.
Okay. And because you're going to have people who understand the forest health and the human health issue, more importantly, the human health issue. But they love deer and they don't want to, and good for them. But it can make it hard to achieve consensus about what can be done. And the last thing you want is this issue to create hate and angst and discontent among community members, as it has the potential to do. The whole contraceptive issue thing, if you want to give a deer contraception, you have to give it multiple doses. Well, then you gotta figure out which deer did you give the dose to, which deer did you not. So you have to get all the deer identified.
Here has a name.
And
Michael.
maybe you could, but the point of it is it becomes very complicated and very expensive. And so, but some communities for $1,500 a deer are having that done. So, yes, sir, but.
So I'd like to speak on behalf of the expanded art.
Sure.
Point. I'm a hunter who lives here on the island. I've both hunted for over 30 years and got hunted the same. And I hunted since the expanded archery has started in West Bath. So, you mentioned earlier, it's for the really tight, congested areas. Well, I mean, if you've ever driven around West Bath, the housing density in West Bath is very much like the housing density here on the island. In fact, there's probably a lot of the island that is denser, especially in the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, our housing density has increased dramatically. So I literally drive from here across the Kennebec and I hunt from September, I think this year was September 7th to December 7th. It gives me a whole separate season that runs concurrent. It's its own season, but during the regular bow season and gun season, I could continue to hunt on that license. It gives me the ability to take one buck and then another doe. And then I can't buy another buck tag, but I could buy as many doe tags as I want. So I could shoot 8, 10 deer.
Wow.
And it's been a very big success over there. And like I really am, I'm surprised that the state has not expanded the expanded archery season, not to just include Westport, but go, I don't know, up to Camden. Because I mean, it's not like we're gonna wipe out the deer herd, and it's going to increase the harvest numbers dramatically. Because like, say you had 100 people hunting Westport, you're giving them another season and 2 more tags. So you're giving that, you know, you're 200 more tags just for those hunters on Westport Island. And that's if they don't buy additional doe tags. So I guess, you know,
Well-
you talked about the expanded season, and I guess I want people to know that actually it's a very effective tool. It's safe. It costs the Islanders nothing.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we understand. There is expanded archery already in Camden. There is expanded archery already down there in and around Owl's Head. I was just providing information that while this was not traditionally why expanded archery was invented, if it wasn't something that we would be open to considering for whether, and you ask them, why don't we do this in all these towns? Sometimes towns need to come and ask, and we'll respond appropriately, rather than sort of, you know, when you have this, you have pretty strict criteria for it. My point is, we'd be willing to kind of massage that criteria if it's gonna help. We're not, our goal is to kill deer. And you make a good point, it is certainly a solid effort. You know, it's just one of those other things. So we would not, I'm not going to say, well, we're not gonna put you in expanded archery if you don't have the traffic that Waterville has. I'm just giving you some history of how expanded archery came in, and there'll be some will be a little reluctant to move to expand that criteria, but I do think it's something that is an option. But the town has to sort of come and ask.
Right. And I guess my question is, has the state considered loosening that criteria a little bit so you can include more towns up the coast to take care of this problem? I mean, because I guess my point is it has been an effective tool. I mean, you
Yeah.
agree with me with that. It's, you know, safer in areas with high housing densities. And it costs residents nothing. So I guess has the state ever considered maybe loosening that?
Yeah, a little bit, but we generally confine ourselves to what that criteria is, and we respond to communities that call in. Like Camden comes in,
Yeah.
they do expanded archery.
Right.
Westport comes in and says, you know, look, Commissioner, we'd really like to have expanded archery. I think that's something that would be helpful here. I think you would find that we would not stomp our feet and say, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't quite fit you do have, you know, it's not quite like expanded archery was, but look, we're trying to come up with all the avenues, and we need, you would find very little opposition. You'd find a little, because there's a lot of traditionalists to be like, but for those of us who are trying to solve a problem that's really difficult to solve, I think you would find that we would be on board with something like that.
Yeah.
So who from the town has to ask and how?
Well, as a general rule, I'd say the followers, the city followers, you know, something else.
The select board.
The select board.
City mothers.
Or, I'm sorry. The mothers. Yeah, so, I'm sorry, it's just the traditional verbiage that I should not have used. So can you delete that from the record? Yeah, and that's why I say, you need a deer committee. You need a few people, because the select board doesn't have all the time to really explore this out. Don't you have other committees in town? Okay? And you want some hunters on that committee, and you want an anti on that committee. You know, you want that committee to be, to accurately reflect you know, you can't like stack the deck to really get a positive outlook. Yes.
When you're looking for, you mentioned something about town consensus and support for either expanded archery or a special hunt. I mean, traditionally, we would do that at our town meeting, which happens in June, a little late. Is that what you're looking for, is like a town-wide vote?
Well, Hallsborough did a townwide vote. And they actually voted 3 times, so, you know, we're not going to I'm not gonna dictate what consensus looks like, but you gotta have something. And at some point, they just brought it to a vote.
And then timing wise, like how, if say we got the town's consensus this year, is that something we would be looking at for this fall or?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be overly difficult to, I'm not talking out of turn, am I?
Well, both an expanded archery and a special hunt would have to go through the rulemaking process. their advisory council, and that's typically a 3-month process with a citizen initiated proposal, the town would come forward with a proposal. And it would go, so we'd have to have it 3 months out before deer season, that actually a little before that, so we could have it in the books, so people would know what's.
So it's really quite possible.
So if we did it in June,
Well,
July,
into June,
August,
yep.
September,
I think we'd have to have it in a little before June, but you could start the process, have that, like Keel said, the deer committee, reach out to the community, whether it's a survey or a vote, start the process, and then in the second step, you can submit more information, which will be in June.
And to be honest with you, expanded archery should be not very controversial.
right,
Don't you think? I mean,
Right.
you're just providing a little bit more opportunity during the hunting season time of the year. It's some of these other things like, for example, when they introduced a special hunt in Islesboro, you had a lot of people like, not on my property.
Well, that's the problem.
And so they actually had to create a map that showed here are the properties that you can hunt, here are the properties that you can't hunt. And the more properties, the more consensus and agreement you could get, the better outcome you could get.
I wonder if the deer had.
Question on that, why don't they introduce, like they have in New Hampshire, feeding sites that are on these open lands to draw the creatures to places they can hunt? Instead of everybody planting the trees.
Well, I'm originally from a state and I hunt and Bob and I both hunt in a lot of states other than Maine where baiting is quite normal and allowed and all, and don't ask me why. It's just a really tough, it's ingrained. It's like Sunday hunting. Some of these things are just pretty heavy lifts, and I can think baiting is fine, but that tradition in Maine has been around a very, very.
They all go to apple trees and
Sure.
cedar and stuff that we all hunt in because we know they're there. It's really no different.
I understand it. And you can help me work on the Sunday hunting committee. Okay, there are just some of these things that are ingrained in Maine, just like the posting and all the crazy things in Maine about it. If it's not posted, I can hunt it and all that other stuff that doesn't exist in any other town in the nation, but that's why we like Maine. Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a Zoom question. Mara Giulianti is asking, why is it safer if a property owner can be shot with an errant arrow rather than an errant bullet?
Why is
I
it
might prefer the
safer?
bullet. I don't know, I think she's asking, Mara, if you wanna speak up, you can actually unmute yourself. I can find her. I mean, I think she's just pointing out, if you have expanded archery, then property owners are still at risk for being shot just with an arrow instead of a bullet.
I mean, they are, but I mean, that risk is so minuscule. I mean, that risk is so minuscule in this state that I can come up with about 5 different sports right off the bat that are infinitely statistically more dangerous than.
So close.
And so, but I understand that that's part of our community that is very reticent toward, so I get it. And I was in the state when Karen Wood was killed in Bangor. But those are, I can assure you this, it's infinitely more safe than snowmobiling in the state. I mean, what we losing about 12 a year snowmobiling. Yes, so I'm sympathetic to that. Let's just say my answer would be a guy with a bow and arrow or a crossbow has a really good, strong sense of what his target is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have as an effective range like archery.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
East Shore Road, West Shore Road, Main Road, Lord Road. So I'm a law enforcement officer here in Maine. I work full time for the town of Wiscasset. Have any of you guys ever met Warden Coolis, the new warden, or Kyle used to be the warden here?
Dory.
So, yep, Dory. So all of those were cases that originated, involving either people from Wiscasset, hunting at night, hunting with headlamps, guns, crossbows in the front seat. I say all that to say this, the hunting's going to happen. So by posting your property, people are still gonna sneak in and hunt. So by opening this up to the town to allow legal hunting, you're now just no longer excluding the good hunters. That's what's happening by limiting the property that my father-in-law, he's here, the new property we got permission to hunt, it's post piece property. And we hope to be able to care for the property the homeowners are gone a lot. They had a poacher come onto the property and it was a person I'm very aware of because I've dealt with them in my line of work. And because we were there and had that relationship, we were actually able to make a criminal apprehension on that because there was a good hunter that had stepped in and helped clear the property and wanted to do it ethically. But because we were there, we were able to step in and have a prosecution when somebody who would be hunting recklessly stepped in. So it's really not a matter of whether hunting will occur or not. It's a matter of whether the right hunters will be hunting and will be present when the bad hunters are there to report it. Because there aren't enough wardens, aren't enough officers. As you've seen, Lincoln County's never here. They're never gonna be here. They're short-staffed. So if you give the good hunters the opportunity to see it, report it, and legally, ethically harvest, you're gonna see an exponential growth in deer harvest and deer hunters. Because we don't wanna fight with that. We don't wanna go fight with poachers. None of us wanna get caught trespassing. So by opening it up to the town to do it legally, you're just gonna improve the situation.
I can't argue with most of you say other than, we can debate whether or not it's going to exponentially increase your harvest, but you know, if it's certainly going to increase your harvest, it's a fair point.
A question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the expanded archery season, with very little knowledge of it, I think the reason that we were never included earlier, perhaps, the thing that disqualified us is that we have a
Yeah, language referred to islands that are connected to the mainland by a causeway or a bridge are excluded. And that was.
So is that the only hurdle we would need to get over?
Yeah.
When we ask for permission?
Pretty much.
So we're not disqualified from it for any other reason?
Not really, no. Other than, no one has brought it up. Not traditionally what you think of as heavily congested like Camden, Augusta, Waterville, Bangor. You don't think of.
Okay.
Of
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
Can we move forward with that piece? One of your suggestions, can we move forward with that like readily and still have the other things building and researched, et cetera, like, do we have to come to you with what we want for a long-term plan?
No, I mean, I think that this is a stepped approach. All things would be a stepped approach. And if you get a little consensus, decide that that's one of the things you want to try, then you should be able to accomplish that.
Okay. It's a good goal, I think.
You know, it's one step. Now I'll do this, we'll look down here. Contraceptive is. No, and we don't do trap and transfer. We just don't do that. We don't catch deer and take them up north, let them out up there for a whole host of reasons. One of them primarily being deer don't handle that very well. And if you trap 50 of them, 40 of them died, you look like a bonehead. And that's what would happen. So, trap and transfer is just not an option for us in that. But people run, and it's just not an option. Catching them and,
Can we get special permission to do a drive from the south end to the north end where you follow them all down?
and you better come and talk to some other people. Because, see, the issue that is, it's safety, landowner rights. You have people out there just going, this is that whole issue about working with all your community members, and some of them may not agree with you, but they understand the issue and they feel like they've been listened to. And they've kind of been taken into account, and some of their considerations have been weighed into that discussion, and they're much more apt to go along, even if sometimes they don't really, they're not happy about it, they heard you. So that's, the thing you should, if you have a deer in your garden and you wanna talk about 3D fencing, and I'll leave some cards and we get, some of my staff, we deal with people all the time about, how to solve nuisance, everything problems. Whether it's beaver, skunk, raccoons, whatever, deer falls into that. I had hoped that this discussion was gonna be more of a higher level, then how do I keep the deer from eating my begonias? There's solutions to that, but I'm more interested in overall community health and
ticks.
exactly, ticks. And so, you know, if you don't understand that correlation that exists between why are there so many ticks? The answer is they're not, it's because there's so many deer. That female tick has to have a third and final blood meal from a medium-sized mammal, which the deer is. So everything about this, every little tick that's out there up on the piece of grass, gasping, waiting on a medium-sized mammal, every one of them successful. Okay, all right, because there's so many deer coming by, every one of them gets a host. Under normal circumstances, a lot of those casting ticks would just fall to the ground and never get their blood meal and never lay eggs. So, you know, there's also the mouse component of that whole cycle, fairly complicated cycle.
Plenty of them.
And, you know, but what are you gonna tackle? You think which thing could be harder, reducing deer numbers or reducing mice numbers? You know, it's both ends of the spectrum, you can do both. But, just understanding that there's a direct relationship between these tick-borne diseases and overabundant deer. It's not made up, it's a real issue. And now you're seeing some of these other tick-borne diseases, babiosis, Paulson virus, over in this, right along this coastal community right here. I don't want to disparage some of these other coastal communities, but they are burning up with this issue. They are burning up. I know, and you know, people who are in nursing homes from tick-borne diseases, and that's just terrible.
So if we wanted to do the expanded archery and a special hunt, we would have to get some kind of application to you by May.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you need a deer committee. It's not really an application. You would talk amongst yourselves. You'd send a little letter requesting some assistance. We'd be happy to provide it, and then you would come and meet with us. And you would meet with, and a special hunt is a bigger lift than this other. And then expanded archery, special hunts are just bigger.
So we would wanna explore both and request both separately.
Yes, sort of. The expanded archery would not be overly difficult to achieve. The special hunt, you're gonna find is gonna be not necessarily a bigger lift from our end, because this is not new to Maine. We have seen the special hunt before, but there'll be some hard questions that you have to answer.
Okay, but you need this by May.
Well,
In order to enact it by hunt.
yes.
Okay, so, and our town meeting isn't till June.
Although we can have a special town
You
meeting.
have to have a special, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can
Yeah, do we have anybody present now that would like me to, jot your name down as somebody interested in being on the committee?
You need a committee for expanded up.
Well, what you want is you want a group of people who really get close to this issue. Because there's a lot of communication that has to go on. And so it's nice to have, and what I would recommend to you to do is go to the town of Islesboro's website. They have all of their minutes archived there, and you can go and you can read all of their history and their deer committee minutes, and it's quite valuable. Islesboro did an excellent job of they had a really good committee, and they recorded everything, and you know, there are other people who've gone in front of you, that's my point, and it's not, you wouldn't be just plowing new ground, but it's quite illustrative what they kind of had to go through. Got to come and meet with the advisory council, got to meet with the commissioner, and the advisory council meets every month,
And there's a couple months where they take it off, but
you know, so the commissioner has. And we need to figure out, I should have thought of this. Who's the advisory council member that covers, this is Lincoln County?
Yes.
look it up.
So you have an advisory council member who sits on the advisory council to the commissioner, who represents Lincoln County. And we need to find out who that person is, see it's on our website or contact information, and they need to be brought into this discussion. Because they're gonna be the one, there's gonna be a vote, and the advisory council members are going to vote whether we're gonna let this happen or not, and you want your advisory council member to be intimately familiar with this, you want to have. I don't even know where, we'll figure out who this is, but you want your advisory council member well clued in on the issue and what you're proposing for a solution.
So you can help us find out who that.
Yeah, it's on our website, I just didn't remember.
It's Wayne Goodall.
Oh, it's Wayne Goodall, okay.
He represents Knox, Lincoln, and Waldo counties.
2 counties.
3.
Right.
Yeah.
So he
She's
should,
spread pretty thin.
so you said he should know about the committee or?
You should, you should be talking to him and saying, look, Wayne, you need to come visit us over here. We got an issue with deer. We're talking with Fish and Wildlife. We need your buy-in and support. This is what we're proposing. But he's the one who's going to essentially, he's your representative on the advisory council on this one from the Bruce Stick.
Wait,
Wayne Goodall.
yeah.
He's a big bird.
Yeah.
Good name for a bird.
Yeah.
What, would the expanded, or would the special hunt, when does that happen? Is it after the regular hunting
We
season?
gotta craft it. I mean, and what we found in the past was, you obviously don't want a special hunt during your regular firearm season. And you don't want a special hunt in the middle of summer. And I mean, those are the details we worked out. Islesboro chose to do a special hunt beginning immediately following the close of the muzzleloading season, which was this Saturday. And so they took essentially the
I
last.
feel like September, October would be a lot more nice for people.
See what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be. But then there's all sorts of, there's lots of conflicts. There's bird hunting season and so that should be determined.
And if you move forward with expanded archery, then you're conflicting there too.
That's right. And so you're not gonna have like an expanded archery going on when you have a special hunt because look, special hunt, we want guns.
Yeah.
We don't want bows and arrows. We wanna be as effective as we can. And not that bows and arrows aren't effective and crossbows aren't effective, but I think. But, that we'd like to use weapons.
More productive.
Jason, back to you.
Yeah.
I got one more
Okay.
question, I guess, and then I'll stop beating this dead horse.
You okay? You're all right.
Dead deer.
Am I right in saying that if the state loosen their criteria between Route 1 and the ocean, all the way up the main coast is now expanded archery season? A, because you are the ones that set the boundaries, and B, it would get rid of all the need for all these towns to petition and go through this whole process. Like you could just say there and you would be addressed.
Well, I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I also know how the Fish and Wildlife Department operates, and we generally we'll work on that piece. I get what you're saying. Usually what we do, to be frank, I mean, we set the general seasons and we set the limits based on a lot of data that we have. But we're very sensitive to towns. And we're happy to help towns, but we want them to come and ask us for help. It's crazy as it sounds. That's just how this is how it's operated for decades and decades and decades. Rather than just go tell towns, but this is how it's gonna be.
And a couple other things to keep in mind, if we designate it as expanded archery, that means only archery equipment's allowed in that zone. And so you're limiting opportunity for firearms and that kind of stuff. And then anytime we go to rulemaking, it follows the public process. So it's gonna go to a public hearing statewide, and so everybody gets to comment on it, like influence their representatives.
I got a question. Why would it limit the firearms?
Because expanded archery is for archery equipment only.
Right, but the firearm season would still allow firearms under.
Gardner has an expanded zone that allows firearms, yeah.
Where firearms are allowed.
All of, use any firearm during firearm season, but it's still expanded. The Gardner
Yeah.
Farms in Gardner, between Route 24 and.
Yeah, I guess that was one thing I was unclear on. You would still have your firearm season, your muzzleloader season.
Just concurrent.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay,
Absolutely. I mean, that would be, we would be going backwards if we
yeah.
didn't do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of. This issue is, it's not easy and I've kind of exhausted kind of where we are. I mean, I'm happy. In almost an hour, but whatever questions or comments or things that you have, but I think you have some reasonable idea of where
You,
to
you
begin.
have given us some ideas.
And my role is to assist the town to go through this process, which is not, it's not an easy process. People haven't got to do it. Rule making, what's that about? And so it's state government at its finest. But we're there to assist you. But I would recommend look at Islesboro's website and go find all their minutes of what they did and how they did it. And that's a pretty good template for they did a good job, but they said it wasn't, if you go without some effort. They had to get on the ferry and come to Augusta. I mean, it's a little easier for you to get to Augusta than there, but. So. I mean, if we got anything else, and not.
No, I think
Anybody
we've
have
got
any
some-
questions for Kim?
Did you get enough people that wanna be on a committee?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 so far. I'm sure we can have some more.
So they need to give your contact info or something?
I think, yeah, we'll need to talk about this in our next workshop and figure out, to have.
Make sure you have some representatives who are not really fond of the idea.
Yeah.
So that,
here?
so that they can be heard and then they can understand the issue and they don't have, maybe they can then.
Oh, yeah.
I don't say necessarily go along with it, but they can understand what we're trying to accomplish. But if you exclude them,
Mm-hmm.
they represent people and they'll just make it.
You've got to hear both sides.
That's right.
Yeah,
When is the workshop? When is the next?
we have
workshop?
workshops every Wednesday,
From 4 to 6.
4 to 6.
Oh, is that a select board
Yeah,
workshop?
yeah,
Okay.
well, we just talk about things. We don't make any
Okay.
decisions or anything else. And because he's just giving this information today,
Okay,
now we want to mull it over as well as all of you mull it over, but what can the town do?
so you'll, as a select board, be talking about this Wednesday and then maybe you reach out to the people that offered to be on. the
Yeah,
committee?
Absolutely, and then we'll have
Okay.
April reach out to the rest of the town.
Okay.
Like, who doesn't want this to happen?
Does
We need
anybody that
a
wasn't
committee.
there, right?
Yeah.
Anybody that wasn't
Okay.
present, interested, that wants to be on a committee. And
Yeah,
We'll put it together, form it, and we'll let
Okay.
Donna run
okay.
it.
Can I ask one thing? From,
Go
I have
ahead.
yeah, so I'm a bow hunter on Westport and a gun hunter. And one thing I think happened this year, people seemed, I think, on the website or the Facebook site to assume that the population just exploded. But if you look at the data of what the man just presented, the deer have held fairly regular in terms of per square mile. I think what happened, I want to hear from the biologist on this, is like there was no acorn mast, there was no water, there was very little browse. And I think people were seeing so many deer because the highest quality food on the island was yards and grass growing along the roads. But I think there was an assumption somehow the population tripled. I'm just curious if I'm correct on that.
I think you characterize that fairly accurately, but some things to appreciate. Deer gets most of his water from the plants it eats. I forget a few other things.
Acorns,
Yeah, yeah.
acorns.
Listen, this is I know everybody loves the turkeys. Okay, but we've heard this until we're blue in the face that, the turkey is eating all the acorns up, which means the deer don't get the acorns and so the population is not as healthy. Well, if that was the case, we'd be able to see that and we don't see it in the data. In other words, if that was the case, wouldn't deer weights go down? Overall,
apples off the tree.
and we look at the point is that everything likes acorns. Everything, every critter. And even in the complete, but acorns are a highly variable crop. They're booming one year and then they bust another, and they're booming one year and then bust another. And even in those bust years, deer go into winter fat. So they're getting it from somewhere else. So in the absence of acorns, okay, I'll let all the great hunters tell me how it changes deer behavior and all this, but nonetheless, in the total absence of acorns, they still go into winter fat. But yeah, but did the drought change things? But you know, you got nice gardens. And for example, deer browse is pretty rough. You know, for right now, I mean, if you're a deer, you've got pretty tough, you know, they're designed this way. They're designed to eat rough winter browse, you know. But if you got leftover squash hanging out there in the yard, no brainer.
They took one off my front porch. We had a pumpkin out there, come home, pumpkin's down on the ground, 2 steps down, got a great big hole in it and all the seeds are gone.
So, you know, they're adapted to
Yeah,
urban living.
yeah.
But,
They like our.
yeah, but rarely is food a limiting factor. And unfortunately, I mean, I guess we could argue for a stronger winter this year. It'd be nice to have some winter mortality. That would help the cause. But you're in the coastal environment, and you're not apt to get severe winters like you get in Ashland. All right, those are all good comments. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm gonna leave a few of my cards. If you have people that want to know what 3D fencing looks like for deer, then we got a pretty good staff, and we help people with deer issues and other kind of issues all the time.
Thank you, Jill, for your, making the time to come. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's pretty important stuff. It's really quality of life issues.
Thank all of you for coming.
Okay, good luck with your next meeting. It didn't look as exciting as this one.